prepared to ask the third question. Okay. Of course, we know that there will be a little challenge in doing some of these things. So, third question is, what challenges, if any, have you faced? What challenges, if any, have you faced? So, who's going first?
Turn my mic on. Yeah, I'll go first just because I know the challenges I face. And I'll just refer to my specific situation is that once you turn on the ability for students and fellow colleagues to contact you at any time, they will contact you at any time. And they begin to expect that continual communication. And so you have to set boundaries and you have to sort of set expectations. And you have to prioritize yourself. So for me, it became a matter of if a student ever asked me a question, I would immediately respond because, first of all, they're kids. And if a faculty member had a question, then if I was free, I would do it. And if I wasn't, they could wait until I was in a place to actually answer it. But I think that was important in my situation where the space was digital and the space was continuous and sort of had to balance between the concept of synchronous and asynchronous. And that continued on when it came to the idea of OneNote, where you have access to all of the things that the students are doing. It wasn't just taking the binder home at the end of the unit. You had the binder in front of your face every single day. And you had to say, okay, I cannot physically cope with all this information that's coming at me. I can't get feedback on everything. So I'm going to have to be very selective in what I do and make it meaningful and make it consumable for the kid, because I can't give feedback on everything and they can't be expected to deal with that. So it becomes, how do I manage this onslaught of information, both communication and content? I think it also goes back to the professional development side that we mentioned with Twitter. Twitter is a flood of information and there's great ideas. If I want to pick a topic, I'm going to be asking, and people are going to be 20,000 ideas, and I'm going to be able to filter what I think is going to be good and what I think is going to work in my classroom with my kids. So dealing with that leviathan that the internet has provided to us. I don't know that I have a solution, but I know that that's my problem.
And I think, Cal, you're right. When we do some of these things that go beyond the classroom walls, I always worry. So I do a lot of project-based learning with my students in order to bring the class, outside of the classroom walls in and take them outside of the classroom walls. And I think sometimes, it's hard knowing how to balance that with the other things you're trying to teach, as well as, making sure it's a doable project, because some things sound so good. Right now we're working on a playground design project, and we brought in our city parks and rec people, and they've talked to us about what safety types of things. And so, there's all this stuff going on. So for the students, it's always that challenge of sometimes activities fail. And if you've invested a lot of time into it, it's hard to accept that failure sometimes. But then also some of the ways that I professionally kind of go on beyond the classroom walls, it requires applications. And I would say I probably am rejected on those applications 90% of the time. But those 10% of the times have been so transformative for me that, I think it's good for our students to see when I apply for a grant for the classroom. I'll let the kids know I apply, and I let them know when I don't get it and when I do. Because, if we want them to be comfortable failing, even though it's still not comfortable, we want them to see us failing as well, so that they know, you don't have to be perfect for these things. And, it's just like modeling, correct spelling. You want to model, you go out there and try. And when it doesn't work, you try again. And when it doesn't work, you try again. And we even talk about that with the lessons when they fail. So I think, it is one of those things where you just kind of keep reflecting and reassessing.
I'll continue on what kind of Callie said, and when things don't work. So a lot of times when you plan a huge project or a connection, you're going to Skype or FaceTime with another class, and then the internet goes out or it's super slow. And how do you deal with those problems and what happens and how do you make that? And then even jumping back to what Michael said, not only taking your kids just outside for the day or something, but like field trips. That's a big part of that. And I've been in some countries where it's not safe to take the kids outside of the school walls, and we're not allowed to because of safety concerns. So, that becomes like, well, then what else can you do? You try to bring the people in, but it's never the same as if you want to go out to those places. And so I think it's a combination, just keeping trying, like you said, and finding what will eventually work.
I think it's funny how Cal mentions about how people are too eager to engage with this idea of outside the classroom walls. I come from the opposite side, and teachers were reticent to engage. They were hesitant. They were stopping and not wanting to engage in something new. I had the pleasure one day of introducing to the staff at my primary school I taught OneNote, and this was about 5 or 6 years ago. I ran a 1.5 hour, 2 hour afternoon session on how to use OneNote with a class. I showed examples of what I'd done with classes I had worked with, and about how I'd even done it remotely, as in I wasn't in the school and was working with kids on the OneNote. And the teachers, it was funny because the teachers responded exactly as the kids did in the first go, by drawing doodles and doing funny comments in the communal space and stuff. And I thought, these are kids. But no one adopted it after that day. I thought, this is so sad, because we can have the staff notebooks, and we can share our staff meeting notes, and we can have conversations between ourselves in a private channel where we're talking about our plans. It was never used. So I would say that the challenge I had is uptake. And I guess I live in a very traditional country now in Scotland. Things are as they are, and they're not horribly bad, so we won't improve it. Whereas I think in Canada, where I grew up, Cal, and I'm not that much younger than you, by the way, I only finished my university 4 years after you, so it's not that much different. I'd say it's a lot more progressive. I'd say that it's a lot more about, this is a new thing, let's give it a go, versus in Scotland, if it's a new thing, okay, if someone tells us we're allowed to, if they prove it to us, and our city buys into it, then we'll consider it. Education, really? But that's my thought. Anyway, that's my challenge.
Yes, I would start by saying that here the major challenge has not been with the students. Actually, our students are always very, very open to getting or learning new things. But of course, the teachers, in fact, let's leave the teachers now. Let's go to the school owners, the school administrators. I think it's even one of the major reasons why we decided to see how we could reach these teachers and begin to teach them and open them up to seeing the advantages in taking or trying out technology. Some months back, I started while I wanted to start, when we started, I spoke with the school owner where I teach, and the woman was, she was quite reluctant, very reluctant. I had to, go ahead to get all the resources myself, get everything there myself. It was on the day we were actually doing our first, I think it was a mastery Skype session, and she came in, she saw it, she was, what's this? And she saw how the students were communicating, and the students were so excited. Then she went back. She came again and she looked. And since then, she started, in fact, the first conference we had here in Nigeria, she supported it. She paid every dime we used, because she saw value and how it impacted our own school. So basically, the major challenge for us here is basically the teachers. Sometimes, like Michael said earlier, you would do the whole thing, set them up, and then let's go ahead, let's do this. In fact, they would jump around and say, wow, this is lovely. It's a good technology. It will help us. And then after that, that's the end. So basically, it's always it's a major challenge because the students are ready. They really want to do this. They really want to, of course, we know students, we know kids. They are always very, very enthusiastic. Whatever you introduce them to, they actually want to do it. But when you have teachers that are not ready to, they don't want to give that extra. And sometimes the extra they are putting in at the beginning would actually make them, stress-free. Will actually reduce the stress from them as teachers. But no, so basically it's the teachers. For us here, it's the teachers once they begin to, understand and begin to accept some of these things that we give to them, of course, it can only get better.
There we go. Now you can hear me. I think as we've been talking here, we've talked a lot about the questions without necessarily answering them. What I'm going to do is question 4 says, what success have you experienced? And question 5 asks, how has the experience been for your students? I'm not sure what you, what I'd like to do, because again, of how time is going for this, I'd like to combine them if we can and say, what success have you experienced and how has it been for your students? Because I think to myself, the success is the experience for my students. And what I'd like us to go, we could, is to explore that experience better, to highlight where the success was. So if you could talk about, and whoever would like to go first, I don't mind again, who that happens to be. Kelly, let's go for you, fantastic. How would you describe again the experience your students had?
Okay, thank you. So, I think, I mentioned it before where we kind of look for things that we're interested in, and then we bring that in for the students. And so I think that's kind of where we can, if we're out there doing different things, we have a wider, a greater breadth of things that we can bring into our students to excite them. And I'd mentioned the NASA activity, the USPTO, U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, has a National Summer Teacher Institute that's amazing. And then you can bring invention into your classroom to kind of have successes with that. But anything like that I do, I always just feel like if they're talking about it and they're excited, those lessons where the kids groan when you tell them it's time to stop. Those are the times when it's a success. When you're working on something and you say, okay, well, we've got to stop for now. And they go, oh, I know, but we'll get back to it. So, anytime you've got students that engaged and that interested in what you're doing, to me, that's a success. And when they talk about it the next year and the year after, that's a success. And the more teachers we can get, with different interests and different passions, inspiring students like that, we're going to catch every student, no matter what their interest is, and be able to inspire them to be lifelong learners. So I think that's where the success is. And yeah.
So I'm going to build on that. Thanks, Kelly. And sort of deal with something that Michael had mentioned earlier. For me, success was bringing a sort of communication equity to the classroom. And for Tahira, it was she couldn't ask a question in class for social anxiety reasons, but she found a space where she could ask the questions that she obviously had. And I think everything we do to use technology, or even just going outside and being in a different physical space, can often open kids up to asking questions and voicing things that they hadn't been able to voice before. So anything we can do to provide that every possible opportunity for every possible one of our children, I think is great. And I would flip that back over to faculty as well. There's always going to be sort of that 20-80 split where 20% of the teachers are jumping on things and questioning their practice and reflecting and wanting to know more. And there's only 20% in that school doing that, and moving outside of their classroom space into the larger professional development environment via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, is going to allow them to build on what they already know and give them emotional support, because teaching is an emotional activity. And if they don't connect outside and they don't get support inside their school, they can reach out to teachers who are experiencing the exact same thing or have experienced the exact same thing, and can get the support that they desperately need when they're sitting at home crying themselves.
I'm just going to add to what you said, Cal, about the whole idea of communicating, using technology for that. I had the pleasure of working with a group of 6 or 7 kids after school for about 3 or 4 months working on coding. And it was lovely because these were the kids who were maybe socially awkward in their way in the classroom, and they weren't the coolest. They didn't see themselves that way anyway. And others in the group didn't see them in that way either, which was unfortunate for them. We went through about, like I said, 3 or 4 months of coding. And then in the classroom, I had a unit on computer coding. and these kids shone. And it was lovely to see that they were able to take their out of school learning, because they did things at home after our sessions after school. They showed the kids in their school, in their class, sorry, how good they were and how smart they were and what they knew. And they became experts in their class. And it was lovely because they were really quiet, but then they wouldn't volunteer to speak. Others were asking them, "Oh, how did you do that?" And it was just lovely to see the smile and the brightness come into their faces, where they got to shine because they were the experts in the room at that time. And they were talking the talk that the other kids maybe didn't understand with the coding language that came with it. So that was great.
Carrie's going to jump in, but I just want to thank her for phrasing it beautifully. She said, we don't know the things we don't know. And if we don't open up the doors, we're not going to find them out. So Carrie, pick up on that.
I just want to kind of end with kind of the connections that the kids make, the understandings that they make through whatever opportunities we give them to learn and understand about the world and the other places and people. To me, that is the success. When I see the kids, like, for example, that global book project I was talking about, they started reading about the holidays. They celebrate the same holidays, or they dress the same, and then looking at also what's different, and just being able to make those connections, and that shows me the success in what I'm doing as a teacher.
Okay, I'll go next. Yes, the successes. I would think some years back till now, there have been a whole lot of changes. Okay, I'll start from my local school where I was working before I resigned. Before I left, I saw that technology was the in thing. The school had to invest in getting, laptops for all the students. They had to, get a projector, which was not there initially. They had to start working on getting their own internet. All the teachers, signed up, and we trained them on OneNote, and all stuff like that. So it has been an amazing one. And from the little that we've been able to do, we've been able to see train like over 4,000 teachers from what we started, just from our locality. We just gathered some few teachers and we trained them. And then these teachers went out. They saw that it was valued. They started, from there, come to this place, and then started spreading it that way. So basically, it has been a huge success. From what we are looking at here, we're looking at seeing how technology could actually take over. Our teachers are stressed. Some of them are going through a whole lot. They can actually become better, and technology can actually do it for them. So that's why it has been a huge success. Actually, there has been a whole lot of improvement from what it used to be. In our own days when we were in school, it was, I tell you, you can. I'm not sure you know anything called Facebook or email or anything. There was nothing of sort. But these days we see students, they have emails from, when they're still in school. They are introduced to 0365. They have their own laptops. Some of them, this is changing. This is the success, and it's making things better in the education sector.